to watch it before our film, just because I didn't want to feel like we were copying anything or had to live up to something. I wanted it to have a life of its own. But I think after this interview today, I think I'm gonna try to find it and check it out.
Yeah, and I suppose George, the idea of westerns, and I mentioned this to Barry there, and I was talking to him recently, and we had a good conversation on why the western genre is sort of coming and going, and in terms of the business, it died off for a good sort of years, and it has its sort of mini revivals, and baby, the industry, as dare I say, in the 80s and the early 90s, you could not get enough Western movies. It almost felt like every second month every month practically, there was
Yeah.
a Western movie coming off. And then
Yeah.
the industry sort of moved away from it in terms as such. And was it always your dream growing up as an actor to be involved in a Western? Was it always a genre that appealed to you? I say Billy the Kid, all that sort of genre.
Oh no, you nailed it. You nailed it. That's my favorite genre. I'm a native Texan. I have heritage that dates back to a saddle and boot maker on the Chisholm Trail. Um, we have a Fourth of July rodeo celebration every year in Belton. And as a kid, I would work the yards on the rodeo grounds. It's always been my favorite genre. I used to watch The Good, the Bad, the Ugly for a fistful of dollars, for a few dollars more, High Plains Drifter, all with my late father. And I remember, I grew up at a time when there was no video games or cell phones. So it was pretty much make believe. And I grew up next to a lot of open ground. So I would go in the back and I would play cowboy. I had a Red Ryder BB gun, and I would go in the back and play cowboys and Indians with my friends. So it was always a dream of mine to be in a Western. Like I said, it's my favorite genre.
And I gotta ask you about this cast. When you look at this name of this cast, there were so many names throughout this film that could lead it in their own right. That could be the main sort of star. And when you go down and you look at this sort of cast of names, and you mention William Devane, the legendary Bill Devane, and he's probably the seventh or eighth name on this list. That's saying something
Yeah, man.
in terms of what you have, in terms of what everything William has done in the industry.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Some friends of mine and I from college got together a couple of months ago, and we graduated in '89 from Texas Tech University. And we were having a little retreat at a friend's cabin, and none of them had seen the movie. So we were having a movie night. They were up for it, and we put on Monte Walsh, and the whole time they were going, "Wow, that's Bill Devane! No way, that's you and Tom Selleck. Is that Keith Carradine? Wait, that's Bobby Carradine from Revenge of the Nerds. Bill Devane, Isabella Rossellini." So
Rex
they were
Lynn.
just as shocked as I was when I was doing the movie, and just take so much pride in that film. I think it was my greatest achievement.
Yeah. And George, in terms of the getting involved in this production roped in, did I know Tom Selleck was one of the executive producers and he had a big hand in it. Did you audition for Tom, or did Tom reach out to you?
I auditioned for Tom, and
That must have been daunting.
it was because Tom's one of my heroes. I grew up watching Magnum PI, and I was a Tom Selleck fan. You kind of have to put that aside when you audition for some of these people. Gosh, I've worked with Quentin Tarantino, John Badham. I've worked with some big name people, and you really have to put that aside so that you can concentrate and focus. And I remember when I went in, it was the scene where Shorty leaves and he's telling Monty and Chet that he wishes he knew something besides cowboying, and they were giving him money for a poker game. I did it once, and before Tom could even react, I said, "Can I do it again and mime the horse, like I'm saddling the horse and preparing the horse?" And he said, "Yeah, do whatever you like." And so I did that, and it just kind of put me in it. I could imagine being there, being a cowboy in the garb, saddling the horse. And Tom had told me about a week later that I'd gotten the part, and I was over the moon, especially being a native Texan. Like I said, it was a dream of mine.
he told me when they were to bring an awful lot of realism to this movie in terms of the stunt. They wanted people that had real horse experience in terms of horse riding. They didn't want guys that sort of train out. They wanted someone who was comfortable because an awful lot of this movie is breaking in horses in terms of this
Yeah.
sort of stuff. So they wanted someone that knew the business, obviously Bill Devane, that's his expertise and sort of stuff like that. Had you any experience in that area yourself, George?
Well, like I said, growing up in Texas, I'd been around horses. I'd ridden horses a little bit. I did poke cattle in Oklahoma one summer with a roommate of mine who was owner of the Drummond Ranch, Tim Drummond, a really famous cowboy in Oklahoma. And we went and poked cattle for about 2 months. So I had limited amount of experience, but when Tom Selleck asks you if you can ride, you don't say no. You say yes. So full disclosure, I went up a week early before the movie started, got together with the cowboys up there that were working the movie, told them I wanted to know everything I could possibly know about, saddling the horse, the bridle, the bit, where you put your feet, where you put your hands. Me and this cowboy went and did wind sprints with the horse. And I remember the cowboys saying horses are really smart. Just because they don't have facial expressions, don't let them fool you. They're really smart. So I was on this teenage horse named Spike. I would talk to him every morning, ask him if it was okay to ride him, asked him to help me have a great day. And I'm glad I did, because about a week later, when I went out there early, a week later, Tom and the producers showed up and they all wanted to saddle the horses and take a little ride. And we were all riding the cast with Tom, first day really meeting each other. And Tom looks at me and he goes, George, why don't you take that horse on up and ride it around that tree and come back real quick? And, you know, I had been practicing unbeknownst to anyone. So I took off on Spike and rode that horse around the tree and rode right back up to him, just like I'd been doing it all my life. And he looked at me and he goes, that'll do. So I'm glad I went up early, man, because that would have been a really embarrassing moment had I not.
Yeah. And one thing I also learned about this movie in terms of how Tom Selleck wanted everyone to be involved in terms of this production, to have every sort of, so in terms of extras, that some of the main time actors, when they weren't acting, they were actually extras in the movie. If you looked hard or close enough, that you might have actually seen them. So there was a case that when people weren't working on a set, that everyone still was in set, and you might be called upon to be a backstage sort of player within a set, which is kind of unheard of in terms of nowadays, that a main time actor could be in one scene and then the other scene he could be way back in the back part with his cowboy hat on playing cards.
Sure,
But that was
sure.
something about Monte Walsh, that he wanted this sort of unity, that everyone was involved, and you were all involved in terms of tidying production, that you were all a sort of knit family. There was no superstardom in terms of this movie. He wanted
Oh,
to
not at all.
bring
You
it back
you
to
really
reality.
yeah, you really check your ego at the door when you're doing a Western. You try to do that in everything you do as an actor. But the whole time, as a group of cowboys, we kind of hung around, sat around the set together. A lot of times when you're doing a TV show, you just kind of run back off to your trailer between takes. But in this, we take our saddles off our horses and lay in the grass. And, Bobby Carradine whittled a knife for his son. The last week of filming, Rex, Linn, and I found a bed and breakfast not too far from Tent City. And all the cowboys stayed there. We made a big fire by a river outside of the bed and breakfast, and all sat around the fire and listened to Keith and Bobby play guitar for hours by the moonlight. And we made Tom a big throne so he could sit, and we just kind of kept his rock glass full and his cigar lit. So we knew it was important to have a telepathy between us that wasn't on the page, that we all loved each other and that we were good buddies. And I think that came across on screen. Tom was big on don't shave, don't get a haircut. Um, you know, when you're in a movie with that many really master actors, especially for me, I loved being on the set, being at the monitor, or being around, watching how they set up the shots, watching Simon Windsor work, who's a genius, watching Tom produce and work, who I feel is a genius as well. Being around great actors, hopefully it'll be contagious and some of that'll rub off on you. But the whole time we would joke, there's no complaining in a Western. Nobody complained. We went to a big dinner after the first couple nights, and I was so sore that I could barely get out of bed. And I remember I leaned over to Tom and I said, "Are you sore?" And he kind of went like that, and he lifted his shirt, and his rib cage was wrapped with an ace bandage. Everybody was dying. They were so sore from not, having done it all their lives, but nobody complained. It was all a wink and a smile because, we knew it was a special thing to get to do.
Yeah, and I suppose trying to portray a scene back in the 1800s, back in 1892, in terms of giving a realism to what those people's lives were, what the circumstances. And what I love about Monte Walsh is there's a lovely pacing to the movie. It brings you in kind of slow. It sort of builds it up. You get to know these sort of characters in terms of that, and you're almost like riding behind them a sort of slow pace. And you're on their coattails. That you can witness the journey with them. An awful lot of westerns that starts off with this big massive chase or this cowboy Indian stuff, and then we're into the hotel, and maybe there might be a shootout, a corral, and then it dips and goes back up. But the pace in this is quite smooth the whole way through. You're watching it and you're not realizing that you're watching it, dare I say.
Well, and that's a tribute to Tom. I loved a lot of I love the pacing as well. I love the symbolism in the movie, like the train that comes up behind him on the railroad tracks and kind of pushes him out of the way. Tom's a master actor and a master producer. I know he worked super hard on getting the music right as well. His attention to detail is amazing. The first couple of horses that I rode in the movie, we were just standing still and the horse wouldn't quit moving. And he said, "George, you got an electric butt. We're going to have to get you another horse." So he got me another horse. And again, horse wouldn't quit moving. So we ended up going to this teenager named Spike. And it ended up being just a match made in heaven, me and this horse. So even my wardrobe, Tom's attention to detail, he wanted to have heart-shaped studs on my shafts. He wanted a sheepskin embutment on my shotgun and to have a shotgun, period. He wanted me to have a really beautiful pistol. And he wanted to make sure my hat was right. He walked up to me one day after the first couple of days. He goes, "George, you like your hat? You like the way you look?" I said, "And you don't complain. You're on a Western." So I just was like, "What do you think?" He goes, "I think we can make it better." And he just puts you in a position to succeed, whether it's me or the other actors. This is a guy that is an actor's actor and an actor's producer. And he knew that if he put us in a position to succeed, that we would take it from there. So it's a real tribute to Tom, the pacing of the film and the overall film as it came off as a whole. Again, I'm just so proud of it.
And
I cry. I cry in that movie, man. I'm not a big crier, but that movie makes me cry.
And I suppose as well, George, sometimes when you look at westerns, the main sort of one or two guys, the hero and the psychic, they're made off to be sort of invincibles, that there's no sort of flaws in their character, that these are mighty sort of guys, these are like living sort of legends. But Monte Walsh, what it does as well, it shows the fragility, the fragilities of all these people. We get to see the Tom Selleck's character, we get to see his down shortcomings and Monte's shortcomings, we get to see the shortcomings of Chester, we get to see the shortcomings of many of these characters. While we do get to see them in their pomp, we do get to see them as well in terms of everything that is the dare I say the darkness or maybe the shortcomings that they have as well, which is kind of unique for a Western because most Westerns will always promote the pomp, they will promote the legend, the ego as sort of such. But Monte Walsh does it in some ways that it shows up the faults just as much as the strengths, which is quite
Yeah,
interesting.
I would say what the movie lacks in glossiness,
Mm,
it makes up for in heart.
mm.
And again, I think it's just a tribute to the acting team that Tom put together. Master actors. Humility is the first word in the definition of class, and every one of these cast members had class. And they just, like I said, they didn't bring an ego. Watching cool people be cool is boring. The movie had heart, and you loved every single one of these characters. I know that the relationship between Isabella and Tom was just pulled at my heartstrings at what they did together. So, yeah, I think it's good to show the vulnerabilities. I know with Shorty, his best line, one of my favorite lines was, "He wished he knew something besides cowboying." Because if he couldn't be a cowboy, I don't really think he wanted to live in a world that didn't have cowboys. There was a couple of times he could have taken Monty out. He had him dead to rights, but he chose to gut shoot him. He chose to miss because he didn't feel like he deserved or wanted to be on this earth anymore. An earth without cowboys is not one that he wanted to be in.
Yeah. I suppose, George, in terms of the industry now at the moment, when we see these series like Westwood and the series like Ace 1793 that's currently out at the moment, going to Raw, much acclaim in terms of that as well. Is that exciting as well that we're seeing a revival of these sort of Western type platforms in terms of Rage back on sort of Amazon Prime, Netflix? It's the streaming services that are running on them. And obviously that must excite you as an actor as well when you see these sort of
It
productions
really
coming
does.
around
It really
again.
does. Now, believe it or not, I'm from the South.
Mm.
So having a resurgence of programming that falls into that genre does excite me a lot. Thinking there might be a chance for me down the road in some of that. I'm a big Tyler Sheridan fan. I like what he's been doing with Yellowstone and Lawman and 1923 with Harrison Ford, who's another one of my favorite actors. And there's this rumor he may be doing the 4-6 Ranch with Matt McConaughey. I'd like to manifest working with Tyler one day. I really love his writing, and he just really, does things that are super interesting to me. I would love to see more westerns. I think it's a genre, if done right, if done with heart, that it can have a resurgence, and everything's cyclical as well. You'll find in this business, maybe a sci-fi goes away for a little while. In 5 or 6 years, it'll come back again. But it's my dream. If from here on out, if I could just do westerns, I'd love to do Steve McQueen's Wanted, Dead or Alive with starring me. I would love to do The Rifleman. I would love to be The Rifleman and bring that western back to television. So, like you said, I think it's a genre that kind of everyone can enjoy.
Yeah. And I suppose, George, just penultimate sort of one or two questions to sort of finish up with now.
Yeah.
The when it came out back in 2003, and it was a busy time for you in the industry, you had an awful lot going on in terms of
Yes,
TV
sir.
series, and was it a nice welcome break to have that sort of movie production to get away from the hectic sort of rigorous sort of rigid schedule that is a TV production to get off and was almost like a mini holiday even though you were sort of working.
Yeah, you're answering the question for me. I mean, there's a lot of technical jargon on CSI. There's no real action other than being on the set in the studio. No complaints. I had a great time there. Mad respect for everyone that I worked with. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for CSI. But like you said, to do a film where I'm riding a horse, where I'm going in my trailer and putting on just like I was when I was a little kid, putting on a Western outfit with a 6-gun and a shotgun, coming out of my trailer and climbing onto my horse and trotting it down to set. Tent city, like I said, you weren't going in your trailer every 2 seconds. Um, they had built a whole town, so when I would come out of my trailer and ride over this hill, you could just see the town sprawled out in front of me. And that little trot down to the set, I was completely and utterly vaulted back in time. I really felt like this was the late 1800s. My name's Shorty, and I'm going down there to take care of business. And there was just nothing quite like it again in my entire career. Vacation, yeah. At the same time, like you said, getting to work with your heroes. Um, it was really a dream come true. I mean, I could sit here and Google and Gaga over it all day.
George, to finish up, I'm going to leave the closing sentences with you. In terms of our cult classic feature, in terms of our movie for this month, Monte Walsh, if you were to advise any of our audience or listeners looking for something to snack on, a bit of popcorn or a bit of Maltesers or a bit of Pepsi, and to bring back the old VCR or DVD or a certain streaming platform and watch Monty Walsh, and if they've never seen it before, what is the whole experience going to be like for them, George Eads?
Yeah, please give Monte Walsh a chance. I don't think you'll be disappointed. You're vaulted back in time with characters you will fall in love with, to a time when things were more simple. Our electronic day and age has got us all busy and got our mind racing, but you're really vaulted back in time when you watch Monte Walsh. And I know that everybody that did the movie absolutely loved doing it. And I think if you watch it, you'll really take something from it. And hopefully it'll pull on your heartstrings. I know every time I watch it, it does me. I full on cry like a little kid when I watch that movie, man. I love those characters. So thanks for checking it out.